Hello, cosmic beings out there. I'm Mannah, a therapeutic astrologer and interviewer. I'm passionate about learning and sharing insights on how to live a better life. I hope you'll stick around as I infiltrate the minds of thought leaders, authors, and healers from around the globe. Wherever you find yourself right now, dear listener, I want you to remember that you have a place to call whole. Now, please enjoy this episode. Welcome, everyone, to tap into this first episode of 2025. And I'm so happy that I'm joined by Kim Barthel. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you, Mannah. I can't believe it's 2025.
Right.
It just rolled off your tongue as if you're in the present.
Yes.
So thank you for bringing me into the present.
Yeah, bringing you into 2025. Yeah,
Mm.
here we are. So you are a therapist and you're a speaker and you are doing a lot of work in training other therapists. Can you say a little bit about yourself? And I'm saying a little bit because we want to get to know you in depth, but maybe just titles, like what is it that you do?
It's always such a complex question.
Yeah.
And an elevator speech would help. However, this is my 41st year of practice. And with that comes a tremendous amount of shift and change. And I am, at the core of my training, an occupational therapist with a deep, deep love of neuroscience.
Mm.
And for the most of my career, I have worked in mental health, supporting children, adults, from the neonatal intensive care nursery all the way to those who are ending their time in life as we know it on the planet, and the lifespan of human experience. I'm deeply interested in the conscious evolution of the human spirit, which filters its way through all the different courses and thoughts that connect back to the brain, to everyday function and integration and living, and deeply how can we best support humans in their existence and experience with each other.
Wonderful, wonderful. You are a great integrator. You are Sagittarius, and not only your sun, but also Moon and Mercury. And so, yeah, we'll be talking more about your chart, but that is definitely someone who synthesizes from different fields in order to get, well, the most of it, to help the most. So I love how it's kind of a thread line for you with this conscious evolution of the human spirit. I have a question that just popped up. I hope it's okay. I didn't prepare you.
You go, you go.
It's just that many people have this issue where they have many insights. They've been to many trainings, many courses, self development workshops, and they know stuff. They know what they ought to do. They know about, yeah, all these philosophical matters, but then they still act the same way. Like it's difficult to change your behavior when you're under pressure. What do you say about that when we're talking about actual evolution? Because that would mean we'll start to do something else with ourselves.
What a brilliant question. There is a deep difference between knowing cognitively and embodied knowing, which lives in you, and the transformation of information from awareness into the depth of my structures of cells, muscles, movements, actions, engagement is part of the evolution. I think one of the challenges is what our expectation of evolution should look like.
Mm.
In that often the assumption is a complete transformation of action. However, I'm sure you know sometimes the most subtle awareness has the most profound impact, like dropping a pebble into the pond that has a ripple that shows up in subtle ways of energetic presentation in the world, of how we listen, how we are present with others. It may not vastly change the patterns of my actions, but change the way I view, perceive, and predict the experience that I'm having, which is actually quite profound and not obvious necessarily. So to me, conscious evolution begins with knowing at some level something that I didn't know a moment before. So in every moment, there is a possibility to rewire the brain, to reorganize the experience that I'm having, which will change my future and rewire my past. So it doesn't have to be this big, huge, transformative, obvious wonder in order to be deeply impactful. I'm curious what you think about that.
Yes, no, really good, really good. Thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot in there. It's both the, like you said, the expectation of maybe just everything's gonna change all at once. And then also what you said about predicting and perceiving and then neuroplasticity. Because when we talk about predicting, that's a major one, isn't it? In our nervous system that you can call it neuroception, that I think, I not think, but like I sense unconsciously on the nervous system state, I perceive danger, or I just maybe slightly misperceive situations. And then
Lisa Feldman Barrett wrote a great book called 7.5 Lessons About the Brain. And she's a disruptor, a scientific disruptor.
I like
In
that.
the way that she describes neuroscience shakes us up a little bit. And one of her biggest premises is that our brain is a feed-forward brain. It's predictive, and it has to be in order to be so fast. And what the brain is then doing is reconciling what is happening in the moment with that prediction. And a lot of our perceptions of our experience come from that prediction. Now, sometimes that early stage setter is epigenetic. Transgenerational transmission of trauma. We have within our physiology a setup. We probably have it energetically, a setup to predict and see. I can even imagine that our astrology would be part of that setup. The predictive sense of how we view the world. And then we are taking in information constantly and referencing that prediction. And every shift that doesn't quite match the prediction is neuroplasticity. And in a sense, evolution. Shifts and change to move and expand, reorient, reorganize the experiences that we've had. And then our DNA and our energy follow suit.
And so that's what you call the embodied knowledge. That's knowing on a different level.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes the embodiment comes first and then the mind catches up. Rather than the mind gets it, you can be addicted to information, but you don't hold it in your knowing until it relates to your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's where it becomes personable, and yeah, I can use it for something in my own life, actionable. Yeah. So you have taught the polyvagal theory and the nervous system for many years, but you also have this feeling. I was just talking to you about that before we started recording, that there's something coming up that's more to do also with a spiritual connection in terms of, yeah, I guess it's all, is it all about healing when you say evolution of the human spirit? I call it healing. Would you say that's a fair word as well, or how do you call it?
Well, my definition of healing is being in alignment
Yeah.
with what is and remaining available for shift and more.
Mm.
But in that definition of healing, which is so different from curing,
Yeah.
there is a state, sometimes it lasts for a second, and sometimes it lasts for years, of staying congruent with my experience, where I experience all the emotions that I have around what I'm experiencing. And this is a tricky dance of duality because it's not a hopeless space, this alignment space. This alignment space is a reality with a simultaneous tension of hopefulness, of availability, of readiness. And humans are fascinating in that we are capable of this expansive tension within us, of two opposites seemingly. Let's say, for example, I have cancer. It's so easy to slip into delusional optimism, right? And the difference between the reality of the state that I'm in and all the emotional vibration that comes with that, and the state of hopefulness and readiness for change. And this is difficult. So, I picked up your comment here around this idea of healing. And healing to me is such a big term
Yeah.
that really needs this embodiment.
Mm.
Mm. Jill Bolte Taylor, who wrote My Stroke of Insight.
And that's on this podcast, somewhere in the archive.
So exciting, isn't she amazing?
She really is. Yeah.
I heard her talk about her 90-second rule, which speaks about how if I can stay connected
Mm.
to the emotional experience I'm having
Mm.
for 90 seconds, that the chemicals, the experience, the holistic experience, neurobiologically, endocrinology, immunologically, it all moves on its own when I'm in alignment.
Mm.
But if I skip out of it, if I bypass it, if I shore myself up too quickly, or if I get stuck in it, that chemistry can stay present in me for 90 years. So this is what I mean by that pivot point of connectivity. And the connectivity to self, and you brought up the word spirituality,
Mm.
to me is the portal into connectivity into something bigger than myself.
Great. Yeah, it's because I hardly finished my question before I started wondering if you were using the term healing or not. But I think you're answering it in there. It's how the spiritual connection comes into. I mean, because you've worked so much with the nervous system, and now you're also opening up to, are you
have been for a long time, subtle energy and spiritual connection. How does it relate to what you've already done?
Well, you're making me smile. I know that the podcast can't see that, so I have to speak that out loud.
And we can hear it a little bit.
Mm.
Smiling voice.
I've met Steve Porges early in my career in many different venues, all the way back to 1987. That was the first time I met him, who is the creator of the polyvagal theory. But one of the most remarkable experiences I had with Dr. Porges was in 2012. And this was at His Holiness the Dalai Lama's Science of Compassion conference.
Mm.
And this particular pivotal conference, which was in Telluride, Colorado, was dialogues around science and spirituality. And in that particular conference, Dr. Porges talked about the conduit or the connectivity between the polyvagal theory and compassion.
Mm.
So he doesn't separate it either. And there is a book called the Oxford Compendium, I think it's the compendium, but the Oxford textbook on the science of compassion. And it's edited by Emma Sapala. And there's a chapter in there by Dr. Porges on the polyvagal theory and compassion, and how states of safety and experiences of connection, the science of love, is the essence of the capacity for connectivity and compassion. That really, if we look at the brain and the brain as it is involved in states of compassion connectedness, it requires having someone somewhere put their mind in your mind. That your experience of attachment, of a felt sense of having been known by another, is the awakening of the neurobiology and the facility to generate that out into humanity. And so there is a connection between this neurobiology and this connectivity to something bigger than myself.
Right, so you call it compassion, but it's in general to something bigger than myself, is what you're saying. That correlates with, that interconnectedness that has a certain, that show up in our neurobiology.
Jay Lombard wrote the book. He's a physician. He wrote a book called The Mind of God. And in one of the, and his terminology of God is very broad. It's very broad in the way that I'm describing it, as this connectivity to all things. And he talks in the book about my very favorite structure in the brain called the right orbital frontal cortex.
This is your favorite structure in the brain?
It's my favorite structure in the brain.
Wonderful.
Because it is the attachment center.
Right.
And he describes through all of his research in looking at altered states, including plant medicine, that this right orbital frontal cortex is a connecting center, connecting into relationship, connecting into self, and connecting in relationship to something much bigger outside of me. That this part of the brain seems to be the hub that participates in this quality of connectiveness and consciousness that we experience.
I really love what you're saying, and I want to hear more. I just want to relate it a little bit to the astrology, because we have Pluto in Aquarius, and it's gonna stick around for the next 20 years. And I'm looking to Pluto because it's in that in-depth where we have our psychology. So I do definitely expect that it's going to transform many things, but psychology as well. And in Aquarius, that's where I think we have neurobiology. But can you just say can you give a definition of what neurobiology is? Because it is in itself fields that are connected, disciplines connected, right?
First of all, I got stuck
Okay.
taking in the wonder of what you just said. So I'm embodying that knowledge of the influence of Pluto in Aquarius, and got very excited at the idea that there is transformative help at
Yeah.
play. And that piece of information, I could feel it in my body. I felt a tingle down the back of my spine. I felt elation in my chest, warmth in my chest. I just wanted to give this example because there is a very quick experiential transformation that went from information into an embodied state of knowing that allowed me to tap into optimism and resonated, not just, ideational optimism, but a sense my gut said, wow, I can feel that too. And this is what I'm hoping happens for listeners, is that process of our dialogue right now is a living example of the conversation that we're having around conscious evolution of the human spirit. That knowing that there is influence at play, that we have a choice to tap into that, that we can plug in there.
Absolutely. Love it.
And so you got me excited.
Yeah, good.
And also gave me a moment to think about the term neurobiology, which, human language is fascinating because we just keep changing words all the time. And a lot of times they mean the same things. But you're right. Neurobiology seems to be a blend of neurophysiology, which would be how all the chemicals work, neuroanatomy, which is the structures. Neurophysiology would also include all the electrical signals that happen, but also psychoneuroimmunology, which is how behavior interacts with our neurobiology, with our nervous system, as well as how it interacts with our hormones and our immune system. So it's this intended umbrella that encapsulates how do we draw from our knowledge about neuroscience to inform other disciplines translationally. So that's how I think about neuroscience, is because I'm not sitting in a lab looking at rat brains. I did that once upon a time, but in this moment, that's not happening anymore. I'm drawing from information that I read with curiosity as to how it might inform other thoughts that we have to have dialogues like we're having right now.
But it's so important. It's so important in the healing field and in the therapeutic spaces, because when we know that kind of stuff, like the polyvagal theory and all the information that you've shared through the years, that helps us immensely to, have a sense of what's going on for our clients and for ourselves as we're meeting, as we're showing up in that field with them. Yeah.
I find that my clients, my adult clients especially, are so much more self-forgiving when they understand the biology.
Yeah.
Like when the biology is, and one of the things that I want to say is very humbling about the field of neuroscience is it changes every second. I mean, I'm on the neural network of the neuroscience news, and I get an article every 12 seconds.
What? Okay.
So
See.
my feed is it's changed, and it's humbling because it's constantly changing.
Mm.
And so you cannot also become attached to what you know. It requires a curious mind to stay open to the evolving frontier of knowledge, and the willingness to reconcile concepts. And the vagus nerve is no exception to that rule. That this is also a vastly expanding area of curiosity. And so we can't get stuck in our history in any piece of knowledge. And that's what keeps this translational information important, so that clients stay in forgiveness of themselves.
Mm. Yeah, and the polyvagal terms, technical terms like that is very helpful, because then I can be like, okay, it was a polyvagal problem that I went into the collapse. It's not something that I have to be so embarrassed about.
It's not a flaw
Yeah,
or a sense of shame
yeah.
that I'm flawed.
Mm.
It was my biology
Yeah,
protecting me. What a reframe that is.
yeah, for survival. Yeah, absolutely. And then I love the thing you're saying about staying open. It's at this moment, it's like blowing your mind. At least for me, like, well, I'm still learning in this therapeutic field. I'm like, oh man, yeah, what can it be? What are we going to learn, right? But it's so good to hear as we are studying as well, because it's what actually Bessel van der Kolk, I like that he says this, uh, that he, this grand man within therapy who changed so much, that he's actually reminding us that we should question what is in the books now, because back in his days, all sorts of things, like being blamed for having, like stuff that shouldn't happen in families. So when all of those misunderstandings could happen and could be accepted as truth in therapy, today we need to be aware about the same misconceptions in our books, right?
Absolutely. And it's my experience, what you're saying, that there are as I just came back from teaching a global teaching tour, and was teaching on all 6 continents.
Okay.
And it's very interesting to see the diversity in focus. And I say that because there are still many places in my experience of the last year that forget about the body in the psychotherapeutic process, that still believe or hold true to their pedagogy that it's very mind-oriented alone, the healing process. And to me, the neurobiology is kind of like the middle ground of that split. It's a doorway in to a dialogue that is safe for those who have stayed convicted to focus on cognition and processing of thought and emotion. That neurobiology brings us into that mind-body connection and makes it safe and acceptable to have that bigger dialogue. So that's been a very pivotal aspect of expansion in 2024, was this bridge building of awareness and openness to look at people holistically.
Yeah, and as you say, like the rational mind, if I get some terms for this, if I get the understanding for it, then you can experiment on my body, but otherwise I'm going to be closed off because it doesn't make sense to me. I've taught that that was dangerous or something. So, but if I understand it, then there's more openness throughout the system, right? Yeah. And so you say that, but you said there was diversity in when you are touring, when you are teaching globally. It's different how people. But can you? I mean, so the question often comes up in talk therapy: can we change somatic problems? Do you get my question? Can we do
Sure.
about the mind body issue if we're only talking?
I think it depends. I mean, that question is, I'm relating that question to myself. As a person who loves to think, and I teach, one of the things in my repertoire is I teach a form of therapy called neurodevelopmental treatment, which was developed for children with movement disorders. So my understanding of movement is vast. And I believe we teach what we need to learn the most.
Yeah.
Because I would much rather sit and think than move any all day. And I know I'm being very humble. And I know that there's a bypassing of the transformative opportunity there. And then I have to get curious about that. I think that I feel fortunate in my training as an occupational therapist. I'm just acknowledging our training is so holistic that it leads us into that place of looking at things from different angles, no matter what. But not all professions have that background.
Mm.
And so I feel that it depends on the person's state of readiness, the longevity of their wisdom. Like there are so many variables at play when you hit that fulcrum of transformation from ideation to embodiment. You know, sometimes you can get stuck for 25 years talking about this. I have clients who say to me, why am I talking about the same thing for 25 years? And, you know, there's only so many things we can work on in one lifetime. And they come in different layers. So the body is not just behavior. It's also cellular. And we don't know what cellular changes are happening as a result of a change of a thought. They might be. You know, in a conversation, there may be a new neural axon that evolved in a person's neural network that arose from that dialogue. That's a body change. But their capacity to bridge that into action or relationship or how they think about themselves is going to need repetition. It's going to need multiple sources of engagement in order for that to be observable. It doesn't mean there's nothing happening. So I think it's unfair to be black and white. We also have no idea what's happening to a person's energy field. I know that, you know, in this dialogue, for example, the synergy, the ease of the dialogue, the mutual love of what we're talking about is an energetic experience that brings passion and which also affects neurotransmitters. so the integration of these things are not measurable. And so each piece is important. And there must be some grand design at work in some way to allow us to harness that knowing, to support ourselves, to have a sense of greater love for our own self in this experience we call life.
Mm. Wonderful question. I feel it's the question when you said it's unfair. I feel like it is unfair with having therapy maybe 1 hour every other week, ideally, right? It's also really pricey, so often that comes into play as well, if you can afford it or not. But even if you ideally go every other week for 1 hour, it's gonna be small changes, and there's a whole lot of different factors that comes into whether or not that's gonna really do something noticeable or not. Yeah.
Think about, for example, Mannah, a time where someone said something to you and you took it in, and maybe 6, 7 years later, you're in the middle of an experience and you go, oh, that's what that means. And it was waiting.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing about talk therapy is the magic of the presence,
Mm.
of being in the presence of someone who genuinely is interested in you.
Yeah.
And maybe they could sit there and say nothing. And the feeling of being felt by another is the magic, is the transformative element. And the dialogue may be irrelevant. Who knows? And imagine if you put all these pieces together, the experience of feeling love, having a reframe, making sense out of things, and feeling it in your body all at the same time.
Mm.
What an amazing opportunity to truly sense oneself.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. The whole just saying the words that I'm feeling, that you're feeling, what I'm feeling, it's like, wow. Yeah, that's some transformation in that. And it's always in discussion whether does any of all of our methods, are they really so valuable that we think? Or is it just because I feel better as a therapist when I'm practicing this model, and then that actually qualifies me to show up more present for my client.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wrote a book with a former hockey player. It's a very strange dynamic the two of us have.
Great.
And his name is Theo Fleury. He was a former National Hockey League champion, but he was also a very serious addict.
Okay.
And he was in Canada, where I live. Hockey is like a religion.
Okay.
And Theo is famous hockey player. And he was sexually abused by his coach in his junior hockey league time. And on the ice, he lived in rage. And off the ice, he was addicted to everything: alcohol, cocaine, sex, gambling. And we have many. It took us 4 years to write this book, and I'm not his therapist because no one could have that much therapy. It was a dialogue of meaning making. And in the book called Conversations with a Rattlesnake, there is a chapter called Helping is Healing and Healing is Possible. That when we therapists, engage in that state of presence and true compassionate connection, we transform our own DNA.
Yeah. Wow. Mm.
That the telomeres on the end of our DNA regenerates. And so as you just spoke what you said, we are transforming ourselves when we show up in that space of love. Now, that happens to be professionally as a therapist, but you could also do that in the grocery store or, at the gas station, in the way that you harness that state in how you engage with people in your everyday life. So I think that those of us who are in helping professions, when it is balanced with self-care, there's the caveat, and we can stay in alignment with that love, there's a dual function there for self and other. So I like that you said that.
Yeah, for sure. I like everything you say, Kim. I really do. I want to talk a little bit about your astrology with you.
I'm excited and nervous.
I'm not going to deny you any of those emotions.
Thank you.
But I mean, having so much Sagittarius energy is exuberance. I feel that that's a lot in that term, right? Exuberance. And you've mentioned a few times as we've spoken here about the hope but for it not to be idealism and the hope, but kind of like not being over the top and not bypassing something. Is that correct? I feel I've heard that a few times from you.
You got it.
And that's a Sagittarius lesson, really, because I have a lot of Sagittarius in me as well, so I know this one. It's getting so excited and just flying high, and that's great, to an extent, of course. And what's wonderful about us talking also about energy and embodiment is your Taurus ascendant. So being born here at 3 p.m., that makes you a Taurus rising. And so that's really where you can show up with this calm energy. And I'm sure that those two archetypes will have had some clashes through the years. But as you show up here on my screen and the way that all of what I'm sensing from you, you really master that Taurian calmness. And I can't help to think in back of my mind, but what about that? What about the Sagittarius fire? But of course, you're using that in all of these fields, but you've mastered something that I personally I'm just training for that and everyone listening who has a lot of fire, this is an issue because we want it so badly, and we are over the hill, like we're just go ahead and do stuff, and then afterwards usually we need to like backtrack and just sense into where we are with everything, because otherwise you had that caveat from before, taking care of yourself. This is a tendency. If you have a lot of fire, then you burn yourself out because you're just passionate. So I love doing what I'm doing. There's no limitation here, except there's a body and all of our needs, right? So I feel, do you agree with me that you kind of mastered this, or what am I picking up here from you?
Woo! I'm taking a breath on what you've said.
Yes.
Well, first of all, I think I would change the word mastered to mastering.
Yeah.
Because it requires a greater degree of consciousness than the fire.
Yeah.
The dragon that sits on my shoulder is like breathing. The Sagittarian zest is like breathing.
Yeah.
And the Taurus ascending requires more consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And in the middle of those two places is the potential for depression, actually. Or I wouldn't say depression, a depressive state. Not depression as a chronic state, but a flatness.
Yeah.
Right? The fire is very exciting. And you can, I just, like I say, have been on the road for 5 months. That's pretty exciting. And being in the mundane is flat. And being in the mundane is necessary.
Yeah.
In order to be grounded.
Mm.
And one of the things that happens to me often is that the sense of overwhelm will create the consciousness of the Taurus ascending, that you call it. And that is a cultivating skill. It's not cultivated. All that, and as I said to you earlier in the podcast, I mean, thank you for that way of putting it. It feels beautiful to own that frame that you just gave me. But earlier in the podcast, we were talking about this idea of embodying. And I've been talking about regulation, as I said, for 40 years. So it's why would you talk about something for 40 years if you didn't have more to learn?
Absolutely, absolutely. I like that mastering. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. Our rising sign, ascendant sign, is the emerging cycle. You can call it the emerging cycle. So one thing is that it's famously known as having to do with our body's features, and that's fine as well. That is one of the mysteries, I think. How can it actually be in how I look? That's wild, right? But just going a little bit deeper into the psychology of it, or even the evolution of consciousness of it, then it's based on that this is where you are on a line of successive lives, like past lives, and now here you are in this life. You're learning to, as you say, cultivate this energy, and that's for you the Taurus mundane, like you said, energy of being in the earth, of the earth, and in nature, in your body, and in that calm, still place. And it is such a tricky thing to have that together with the Sagittarius that has that gypsy sense and wanting to travel the world, and but they both have to be there. And it's such a, I think, I mean, if not for the earth in you, we would never, like, maybe actually get to meet you. You would just be out there, maybe, right? So this is really like taking it in and integrating it into something that's sustainable and that can help other people. Yeah, and you had a thing you said earlier around the different, like, yeah, when you speak about, I've been talking about this for so long, or even us as students, we can feel, oh, I have to learn this one more time. Am I not done with this? And this is similar to astrology, where we can see it's layers of it. It's really, and it's like a spiral. Right now you're so maybe as a young person you already came to this a deep connection with your body. So why is it still something? Because there's a new level to it, and Taurus is also the archetype that has to do with energy work. So you see, it's constantly, there's new revelations in there as we grow.
Wow. I think what you have added for me today is a huge gift. What an amazing, remarkable way to start 2025, because what the audience doesn't know is that before we came on the podcast, we had a small conversation around the missing emphasis on energy. And I was sharing with Mannah that in the 90s, my focus was on subtle energy healing, energy medicine. And there was so much emphasis there in literature, in conferences, in books. It was just so hot in that era. I am 62, so I am a junior senior. I get to talk this way now. It was such a hot topic that seems to not be as present in the everyday dialogue or in the foreground of our conversations. And I'm missing it.
Mm.
And what you are saying is that it's there. And it comes in layers as a spiral, and that we tap into it differently across time.
Exactly. Exactly. And maybe you were talking about how things are called something different. Maybe it has been a big part of your work, right? Just not calling it energy work, calling it something else. I don't know, embodied work or something.
Right. It's that changing words
Mm.
with the same threads,
Yeah.
and forgetting that those threads are there. So what an amazing gift you are. Thank
Well,
you.
I'm so glad it lands that well for you. I'm really glad. It's really lovely when there is someone who has this openness to astrology. I'll just speak on behalf of that ancient discipline. That is really nice, because that's I feel one of my missions in life is to do some work around connecting it to the modern, well, therapeutic field, because that is being taken seriously now, hopefully more and more, and so should astrology, in my point of view.
I share your point of view.
Mm. So Kim, here in the end, what's up for you in the coming years? Are you gonna learn something more? Are you gonna dig up what you learned a long time ago? What do you think? What's up for you in the
Thank you. Thank you for asking that question as a way of moving towards the end, but not moving towards the end.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Super cool question. Well, one of the things I want to say is the only thing I think that would stop me, and maybe it's not even true, what I'm about to say, from this conscious curiosity is the loss of my cognition.
Ah.
And see how I said, and maybe that's not even true,
Mhm.
because we don't actually know about the capacity for consciousness to evolve without what we call cognition, dementia as an example.
Mhm.
So the idea of continuing to learn and share, it doesn't end for me. And we have many different courses sitting in the wings. One of the hot topics for this year is anxiety
Oh,
and the epidemic of anxiety.
that's a good one.
So much request to dive into that dialogue. And also talking about really difficult energies, how to protect oneself in the face of what we perceive as mean
Mm.
or destructive or challenging, things that, again, I need to learn myself. So those are topics that are sitting right in front of me right now,
Mhm.
that are demanding preparation as we take them live in the next couple months.
Wonderful. That is also a Sagittarian lesson. I just want to add that to the picture about what you're saying, that I'm also learning what I'm teaching. And I mean, because one expression of this, and probably in the beginning of this archetype, you would more be like, yeah, I'm teaching this, thinking that I already learned it. That's one way of using the Sagittarian archetype. And then when you realize that you're actually teaching something that's way ahead of your own development, then you start to come up with phrases like you're doing here, like, hey, I'm still learning this, you guys. Don't think I'm a guru or anything. I'm still learning this, but I'm just a really good teacher, and I'm doing the work on myself. So you can trust me to be aware of myself, and where I'm not fully there yet, but I'm working on it, sort of thing. That I'm feeling that's really into the Sagittarian lessons. Can you recognize some of that?
Oh my gosh, yes. I think you just, I mean, that is how I feel about myself every day. Yeah. And you're right, I'm always teaching things that are way ahead of me.
Yes.
And that's part of the fun.
Yeah, it's part of
And
fun.
so what will come up, I just can hardly wait to find out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It keeps it interesting for us, right? For our curiosity. Oh, thank you so much, Kim Barthel. Really wonderful to be with you. And I have a huge stellium in Sagittarius. And it's not my sun, but I have it in my chart, so I'm really resonating with all of that. So just thank you, and please come back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I feel like I've been given a big gift today. And just a shout out to my friend and colleague, Hattie Marker, who put us in connection with each other. So blessings.
Yes, blessings to him and everyone listening.